What if the man you were forced to marry was nothing like the monster you were warned about? What if he met you with kindness instead of cruelty? The train whistle screamed through the late afternoon air as Josephine Franklin clutched the letter that had taken away her entire life. Her father had sold her to a stranger, a cattle baron from the Montana Territory who needed a wife. At only 20 years old, Josephine was leaving behind Boston, her mother, and every familiar street she had ever walked. Her mother's final words echoed in her mind. Submit to his will, no matter how cruel. A woman obeys her husband. Those words felt like chains around her heart. The train hissed as it slowed. Through the window, Josephine saw the tiny frontier town of Silver Creek, a dusty street, a few wooden buildings, and the wide, empty land stretching beyond. The West looked wild and unforgiving, just like the stories she'd heard about the men who lived here. Harsh, violent, uncivilized. Her future husband, Daniel Thornton, owned the biggest cattle ranch in the territory. If the land was as rough as people said, what would that make the man who tamed it? The porter helped her step down, placing her two heavy trunks beside her. She stood alone on the wooden platform, her navy dress catching the breeze, her heart pounding. The letter said he would meet her here, but no one approached. No one even looked in her direction. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he didn't want her. Maybe he had seen her father's description, sensible, obedient, pleasant, and decided she wasn't worth the trouble. Just as fear tightened her throat, a tall figure stepped away from the shadows of the station building. He walked like a man who lived in the saddle, broad-shouldered, lean-hipped, confident without trying. As he came closer, Josephine saw sun-bronzed skin, a firm jaw touched with stubble, and clear blue eyes that reminded her of a summer sky. Not handsome in the polished Boston way, handsome in a strong, quiet way. "Miss Franklin?" he asked, his voice deep and warm with a Western drawl. Josephine nodded, unable to find her voice. "I'm Daniel Thornton," he said, removing his hat. "Welcome to Montana Territory." She dropped into a small curtsy. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Thornton. I hope I find you well, sir." But he didn't answer right away. He studied her, really studied her, until she felt heat rise to her cheeks. She braced herself for hard rules or a cold warning. Instead, his voice softened. "I know this wasn't your choice," he said. "Your father arranged this without asking you. I want you to know something from the start." He stepped closer. "I'll be kind to you. That's a promise." Josephine blinked in shock. "I beg your pardon." He smiled faintly. "I said I'll be kind." For the first time since her father sold her future, Josephine felt something loosen inside her. Not hope, not trust, but maybe possibility. "Come," Daniel said gently. "It's a long ride to the ranch. We should get going before dark." A young ranch hand named Tommy loaded her trunks onto the wagon. Daniel offered his arm, a gesture that surprised her, and helped her into the small buggy. He didn't crowd her. He sat respectfully at her side as they rolled through Silver Creek. People nodded to him as he passed. His hands on the reins were rough and calloused, the hands of a working man, not a Boston gentleman. "I expect you have questions," he said. Josephine hesitated, then nodded. "Many." "Ask them," he said. "All of them. I want no secrets between us." Her first question slipped out before she could stop it. "Why would you marry someone you've never met?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Montana is beautiful," he said at last, "but it's a hard place. A man can build a ranch, but it takes a woman to make it a home. Your father said you were educated, sensible, a good match for a rancher." Josephine's chest tightened. "My father exaggerated. I was not looking for a husband." Daniel's eyebrows lifted slightly. "No?" "No. He sent me here because I refused the men he chose in Boston." Instead of displeasure, Daniel chuckled. "Sounds like you have a mind of your own. That'll serve you well out here." They left the town behind. Rolling golden hills stretched ahead. Mountains rose blue and steady in the distance. The vastness stole Josephine's breath. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Daniel agreed. "That fence line there, that's the start of my land." She listened as he told her how he built everything from nothing. How he worked as a ranch hand at 18, saved every penny, bought land, bought cattle, and kept fighting until he owned the biggest spread in the county. "You built all that yourself?" she asked. "Yes, and it's still growing." Josephine found herself admiring him, not just for the land he owned, but for the way he spoke about it, with pride, with care. "Your father also said you're good with numbers," Daniel added. "Said you helped with business matters." Josephine hesitated. "He never liked that I did more than copy letters. I improved them, suggested better wording, better deals." Daniel nodded slowly. "I could use someone like that. Ranch accounts get more complicated each year." "You would trust me with business matters?" she asked carefully. "Why not?" he said simply. "You're educated, and you'll be my wife. Partners help each other." Partners. The word warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. By the time they reached the ranch, lanterns lit the yard, cowboys gathered to stare curiously, and a stern housekeeper named Mrs. Winters came to meet her. Inside, the house was warm, sturdy, welcoming. Daniel never stopped surprising her. At dinner, he spoke to her with respect. When she asked what he expected of her as his wife, he answered honestly. "Honesty, loyalty, and I'll give the same. I don't expect love, at least not at first, but I hope we can build something good." That night, alone in her room, Josephine realized something dangerous and wonderful. Daniel Thornton was nothing like the cruel husband she had been warned about. And that terrified her more than anything. The next morning, Josephine woke to soft light slipping through the calico curtains and the faint smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. For a moment, she lay still, listening to the quiet hum of ranch life beginning outside. Men calling to one another. Horses snorting. Boots on hard-packed dirt. It was so different from Boston, yet strangely peaceful. She dressed carefully, smoothing her pale blue day dress before stepping into the hallway. Mrs. Winters looked her over with a sharp eye as she approached the dining room. "You'll do," the older woman muttered, though her tone carried more approval than her words. Daniel stood when Josephine entered, a gesture she didn't expect from a man of the West. "Good morning," he said kindly. "Hope you rested well." "Yes, thank you," she replied, though the truth was she had barely slept. Her mind had replayed every moment of their buggy ride, every gentle word, every unexpected kindness. She didn't know what to make of Daniel Thornton, and that uncertainty made her heart race. As they sat for breakfast, Daniel cleared his throat. "I thought we'd take a ride after we eat, show you the ranch if you're willing." Josephine hesitated. She had only ridden side saddle in Boston's city parks. Riding across Montana terrain felt like another world entirely. "I can ride," she said quietly, "but not as you do." Quote. Daniel smiled. "You'll ride however you feel safest. We'll take it slow." Mrs. Winters gave a small huff. "She can handle it," she declared. "Girl's got more backbone than she looks." Josephine's cheeks warmed, surprised by the woman's sudden support. An hour later, Josephine stood beside a gentle, dappled gray mare named Dove. Daniel tightened the saddle and checked the reins twice, making sure everything was secure. "You ready?" he asked softly. "I think so." He didn't boost her onto the saddle without warning. Instead, he placed one steady hand beside her stirrup. "I'll help when you say so, not before." That small respect eased the nervous flutter in her stomach. "Now," she said. Daniel helped her mount with careful hands, and when she settled on Dove's back, she felt a little spark of pride. She straightened her spine and met Daniel's eyes. "You look right at home," he said, admiration flickering across his face. They rode out across the open land. Golden grass waved in the wind. The Blue Mountains stood tall in the distance. Josephine had never imagined such freedom, such endless sky. "This place is incredible," she whispered. Daniel watched her with quiet satisfaction. "I hoped you'd see it that way." He pointed out the boundaries of his land and explained how the ranch ran, the cattle herds, the breeding lines, the water sources, the men he trusted. Josephine asked thoughtful questions, surprising Daniel again and again. "You understand business," he said, after her third clever suggestion. "More than most men I know." "My father never appreciated that," Josephine admitted. "I'm not your father," Daniel said, his voice steady and warm. and I won't make the mistake of ignoring a smart mind." She stared ahead, unsure how to respond to a kindness so unexpected. They reached a small creek lined with tall cottonwoods. Daniel dismounted first, then helped her down gently, his hands warm on her waist. They walked to the water's edge where a fallen log made a place to sit. "Do you miss Boston?" he asked. Josephine thought carefully. "I miss certain things. My mother." Her voice softened, "But Boston itself, no." Daniel nodded. "And your father?" Her chest tightened. "My father sold me to you without asking what I wanted. I don't miss that." Daniel's jaw clenched, anger flashing in his eyes on her behalf. "You're not property," he said firmly. "Not to me. Not ever." Before Josephine could answer, the sound of galloping hooves broke the quiet. A rider approached fast, Jack Miller, Daniel's foreman. When he reached them, he pulled back hard on his reins. "Boss, trouble at the north boundary. 3 steers shot dead." Josephine's blood ran cold. "Who did it?" Daniel demanded. "Maddox," Jack said grimly. Left his mark carved into one of the carcasses. Josephine saw Daniel's expression change. Calm, kind Daniel, turning sharp, hard, dangerous. He stood tall. "I'm going." Jack nodded. "I've got the men gathering now." Daniel turned to Josephine. "You'll go back to the house with Jack. Stay indoors until I return." "Is it dangerous?" Josephine asked softly. Daniel touched her elbow, steady and reassuring. "Nothing's going to touch you." "Not while I breathe." Quote, but Josephine saw something in his eyes. Worry, determination, a storm gathering. Jack helped her mount Dove, while Daniel swung onto his stallion with practiced ease. "I may be late tonight," Daniel said. "Do not wait up." And with that, he galloped away, dust rising behind him like a warning. Josephine rode back with Jack, her heart pounding. She had never seen Daniel angry, but even in his fury, he seemed controlled, careful. A protector. A leader. Back at the ranch, Mrs. Winters immediately sensed something was wrong. "Maddox again?" she asked bitterly. Josephine nodded. The older woman's face darkened. "That man won't rest until someone's dead." Josephine swallowed hard. "Is Daniel in danger?" Mrs. Winters fixed her with a steady look. "Your husband is strong, smart, but even strong men fall on the frontier if the wrong enemy pushes too far." Josephine's throat tightened. She spent the rest of the day trying to busy herself, preparing supper, helping in the kitchen, doing anything to keep her hands from shaking. But no task eased the worry clawing at her chest. Night came. Daniel didn't. Hours passed. Still no sign of him. Josephine stood near the window, unable to look away from the dark yard. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every whisper of wind made her heart race. Then, hooves. She rushed to the door and threw it open. Daniel rode into the yard at last, shoulders heavy with exhaustion. His sleeve was torn, blood darkening the fabric near his upper arm. Josephine gasped, "Daniel!" He dismounted, swaying slightly. "It's just a graze," he said, brushing it off. But he didn't hide the wince when she reached him. Without thinking, Josephine took his hand. "Come inside. Let me help." Daniel looked at her with something deep, something powerful, something unguarded. Then he nodded. Inside the warm glow of the sitting room, Josephine cleaned his wound with careful hands. Daniel watched her, his eyes soft despite the pain. "You worried?" he asked quietly. She didn't try to hide the truth. "Yes." A faint smile touched his lips. "You don't need to fear for me." Josephine tied the bandage and met his gaze. "I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for you." Daniel's breath caught, and something shifted between them, something neither could name yet, but both felt. Danger was coming. And so was something else. Something tender, something growing, something they didn't yet have words for. The next days passed in a haze of tension that settled over Thornton Ranch like a storm waiting to break. Josephine tried to keep busy, but every sound outside made her pause. Every distant shout made her heart race. Daniel stayed close to the house, his movements careful because of his injured arm, but his eyes were always alert. Something was coming. They both felt it. One crisp afternoon, Josephine was gathering eggs from the henhouse when she noticed a cloud of dust rising in the distance. At first she thought it was Daniel and the cowboys returning from checking the southern pasture, but as the figures drew closer, her breath stopped. Mrs. Winters ran out to the porch. "Riders!" she said sharply. "Too many. Those aren't ours." Josephine felt the cold rush of fear. 6, no, 7 men rode hard toward the house. Leading them was a broad-shouldered man with silver hair and cold eyes, Roland Maddox. Josephine froze, but Mrs. Winters shoved a rifle into her hands. "Inside, girl! Bar the doors!" Before they reached the door, the riders thundered into the yard. Maddox pulled up his horse with a smug smile. "Well, now," he drawled, "if it isn't the little Boston bride." "A shame Thornton ain't here to protect you." Josephine stepped forward before Mrs. Winters could stop her. "State your business and leave." Maddox smiled coldly. "My business is simple. I want this ranch, and I want it now. Tell your husband to sell, or he won't make it home next time." "You won't threaten us," Josephine said, gripping the rifle tighter though her hands trembled. "Leave our property." "You think I won't hurt you?" he asked, amused. "You are a small thing, Mrs. Thornton, pretty but fragile. And very alone right now." Mrs. Winters lifted her shotgun. "Take one step closer and you'll regret being born." Quote. Maddox's men began spreading out, forming a half circle around the house. Josephine swallowed hard. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and Daniel didn't even know what danger was coming toward his home. A spark lit in Josephine's mind. Not of fear, but determination. "We can make a deal," she said quickly. "The water rights, you want them, lease them." Maddox's eyebrows lifted with interest, then lowered again. "Clever girl, but I don't want part of this land. I want all of it." His hand lifted. A signal. Josephine tightened her grip on the rifle. But before Maddox could give the order, a shot rang out from the ridge behind them. One of his men fell from his horse, yelling in pain. More shots followed. Maddox's men scattered, shouting in confusion. Josephine's heart soared. Daniel was coming. Riders burst over the ridge. Daniel at the front, Jack Miller beside him, and 10 ranch hands behind them. Dust rose like a storm. Guns flashed in the sunlight. "Get off my land!" Daniel roared. Maddox cursed and turned his horse. "Fall back!" Quote. His men fled with Daniel and his cowboys chasing them to the property line. When they returned, Josephine ran down the steps before Daniel even dismounted. "Josephine," he breathed, pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, clinging to him as the fear she'd held onto all afternoon flooded out at once. "I'm not hurt, but your arm." "I'm fine," he assured her, cradling her face in his hand. "But he came here, to you." She nodded, her voice catching. He said he wouldn't ask again. He wanted everything. Daniel's jaw tightened. He'll get nothing. Not now. Not ever. That night, the marshal arrived after hearing news of the fire that Maddox had set as a distraction. Jack and the cowboys had managed to save the north pasture, but the damage was clear. Maddox had crossed a line. "We'll take statements," the marshal said, "and ride for Maddox at dawn." Josephine insisted on coming. Daniel tried to refuse, but she stood her ground. "I faced him once today," she said. "I'll face him again." Quote, Daniel looked at her like he was seeing her fully for the first time. Strength, courage, and fire. "All right," he said softly. "We'll face him together." At sunrise, they rode to Maddox's ranch with the marshal and his deputies. Daniel stayed close to Josephine, his arm still in a sling but his grip firm on his reins. When they reached the ranch, Maddox barricaded himself inside his house, firing shots from the windows. His gunmen returned fire, determined to protect their leader. Smoke began to rise from the back of the house. Josephine saw it first. "Fire!" she cried. "They're trying to escape out the back." The marshal reacted instantly, sending deputies around the side. When Maddox and his men ran through the smoke, coughing and half-blind, they ran straight into the waiting rifles of the law. Within minutes, it was over. Maddox was dragged from the ashes of his burning home, spitting curses but defeated. "You can't keep that land," he snarled at Daniel as he was bound. "You'll lose it all someday." Daniel stared him down with a calm Josephine had never seen before. "Not while I'm breathing." Later, as the marshal prepared to take the prisoners away, he tipped his hat to Josephine. "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Thornton. Most folks would have run." Josephine glanced at Daniel. "I wasn't alone." In the weeks that followed, peace returned to Thornton Ranch. Maddox was charged with arson, attempted murder, and more crimes than Josephine could keep track of. His men fled or were arrested. His land was auctioned off, much of it reclaimed by families he had stolen from. Life settled into a gentle rhythm. One snowy evening, months later, Josephine sat by the fire reading a letter from her mother. Daniel entered from the cold, brushing snow from his shoulders. "She's coming in spring," Josephine said softly. "My mother, she wants to meet you." Daniel smiled. "I'll be honored." Josephine touched her hand to her stomach. She hadn't grown much yet, but the new life inside her was real. Daniel noticed instantly. He always did. "How do you feel?" he asked gently. "Better," she said. "I think the worst of the sickness is over." Quote. Daniel sat beside her, placing his hand over hers. His eyes softened in that way they always did when he looked at her now. "I can't wait to meet our child." Josephine leaned into him, warmth flooding her heart. "I never imagined this," she whispered. "When I stepped off that train, I expected a cruel husband, a prison." Daniel took her chin gently, lifting her face to his. "I promised you kindness," he said. "I'll keep that promise every day of my life." "And I'll love you every day of mine," she whispered. Snow fell softly outside. The fire glowed warm around them. In the quiet of their home, safe, peaceful, and filled with love, Josephine knew she had not just found a husband. She had found her forever.